here. Welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. I just came back from work. It's been an exhausting day. It's 7 p.m. We've got roughly 45 minutes of light before it gets dark, and I just wanted to film these and upload these as soon as possible in the month. So here I am after having just a snack, so probably still got crisps on my mouth. I'm doing my March wrap up. I will start with some statistics and I'll try to be again as brief as possible, just because the phone is also kind of dying. So this month I have read a total of 11 things. 8 were physical books, 2 were audiobooks, 1 was a graphic novel, and I DNF'd 1 book, but it's not included in the 11 books. So I've attempted to read 12 books, but I managed to finish 11. And just the books, physical books, amount to a total of 3,279 pages. In terms of years, 1 book was between 1900 and 2000, 9 books were between 2000 and 2020, and we've got 1 2021 release. I've read 5 female authors and 6 male authors. Of my TBR, I managed to finish completely 8 of those. Target wise, 1 middle grade, 2 were YA, and 8 of those were adult books. In terms of stars, we got 1 in the range of 2 stars, 1 in the range of 3 stars, 6 in the range of 4 stars, and we actually have 3 5 stars, which is amazing. If you know me, I don't really do 5 stars, so it's so cool that I found 3 this month. In terms of genre, I have read 4 horror books, 2 non-fiction, 1 contemporary book, and then I have read 4 fantasy. 1 was a military fantasy, 1 was a comic fantasy, 1 was a sci-fi, and 1 was a romantic fantasy. And again, I'll link it up below the video where I talk about fantasy subgenres, so you know what I mean better. Those are all the statistics I usually give. Let me know if you want to know anything else. And let's start with the books. So the only reason why I didn't actually finish my TBR this month was the domestic violence memoir book that I read. It came from America, from a thrift book shop in America, and due to COVID and all of that, it took more than a month to come here, so I received it last week. And also I didn't want to have 2 memoirs, domestic violence memoir diaries videos in April, so by me moving these to April just makes it more neat and tidy, and that's okay. Then the other, which I actually DNF'd, was in the ending series TBR, which is Eternal Dawn by Rebecca Maisel, YA fantasy where you got a vampire queen turned human and fall in love with another human and all of that. And I don't know, I was reading that and I've read more than half of these, and then I was like, I don't care, and I don't have enough time to read a book I don't really care about. I used to love these as a teen, and I probably would have loved these back then, not as an adult woman. It's just not for me. I don't want to ruin, you know, the whole thing. It wasn't terrible. It was just very much YA, very, very typical YA. And I just don't click with this kind of YA anymore. So I put it down, DNF'd it, and that's okay. So first book I have finished in the month of March was Hat Full of Sky by Terry Pratchett. This is book around 30. I don't remember exactly. Sometimes I write it down. No, it's fine. And this is around book 30 in the series, and this is part of the sub-series of Tiffany Aching, which is a YA book. But again, this is a kind of YA that I really enjoy. And I love Terry Pratchett writing style and all of that. I cannot give you any synopsis for this because again, in the sub-series is the second to last book. But you follow Tiffany, she's a witch apprentice, and the peculiarity of the series is that she also has these kind of blue fairies that are more like blue tiny gnomes, and they are called the McFiggles, and they have like a Scottish accent, and they are freaking hilarious. I love them, and they follow her around, and they are all in her adventures so far, at least. And that's why I love this series so much, is because of McFiggles. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they are the reason why I love Tiffany series so much. I enjoy these, nice teachings. Again, the McFiggles are just freaking hilarious. The way they talk, they just, you know, always get a smile out of me. I sometimes struggles with Terry Pratchett plots, but I guess in his YA he keeps them more simple, more logical, so that's why I enjoyed probably these particularly, and I gave this 4 stars. The second book I finished was Perfume by Patrick Suskind, and I read these because of my European TBR, and with these we tackled Germany. Well, I tackled Germany at least. And this is the story of a young boy born odorless, and he's abandoned at birth and is raised by a series of people that always mistreat him, and the only joy he has in life are perfumes. So he develops this particularly sensible nose where you can recognize any kind of perfume odor, from inanimate objects to humans, and he becomes obsessed with finding the best perfume, the best scent ever, and his obsession turns extreme. It gets to extreme levels. It says here the story of a murder, so you can guess what I mean by that. Now, I actually didn't like this one. I thought I was gonna love it. It sounded just right up my alley. I think it was one of the issues was the one-dimensional character. I don't know, I thought it was just evil, where I tend to like my villains with a bit more layers to them, while here he's very disgusting and gross. I found him at times gross, and it wasn't a kind of gross that was fascinating to me. I still found that just, I don't know, I was just uncomfortable, but not in a way of, oh, he's making me scared, upset. I love this, I enjoy horror usually. It's just about, and there was a scene toward the end with a lot of people behaving in a certain way, and I found that scene absolutely absurd and disgusting again, not in a way of, well, this is disgusting, but I love it, just disgusting. I was like, this is nonsense. I just didn't like the plot. I didn't like the fact that it was actually slower, much slower than I thought it was gonna be. I didn't have anything with the writing per se, to be fair. Just a weird story that it's not my kind of weird. And I ended up giving these 2.5 stars. Then I finished my best friend's Exorcism. This was for my horror TBR, and this is by Grady Hendrix. This is story of these 2 girls. They are kind of outcasts in their elementary school. When they form this friendship, they become inseparable, and one night one of the girls, she's under drugs, gets in the woods, and when she comes out she's not the same. And again, my best friend's Exorcism, so you can imagine what this is about. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I loved the 80s vibes, like the 80s vibes from the cover to the songs in these, and I would highly recommend listening to the songs while you read these. They are mentioned. If I'm not mistaken, they some of the titles, at least I think all of them, but songs from the 80s. I loved those aspects of the book. I found this though at times silly. I was expecting something a bit more darker, to be honest, while this almost reads like a YA. I didn't categorize this as a YA, but it could be potentially. And sometimes the characters made choices that just, I couldn't stand them. I was just a bit annoyed at them. I was like, you're so freaking dumb. That kind of vibe, if you want to. But I read this so bloody quickly, like all his books. He's got such a nice flowing writing style, I believe, that I will check everything else by him. I generally enjoyed this. I just didn't love it. And end up giving this 3.5 stars. I've listened to The Last Town by Blake Crouch. This is the final, actually I did complete one series this month. This is the final book in a trilogy by Blake Crouch. I think it's called the Wayward Pine trilogy. I categorize this as sci-fi because if I give away the actual subgenre / the genre that you might also categorize this in, it can be a spoiler. So I say just sci-fi. First book, you get Ethan Burke. Ethan Burke wakes up from a car accident in a small town in USA. He doesn't have any recollection of how he ended up in the town, what happened in the accident. At the beginning, he doesn't even remember his name. And then slowly you get to follow Ethan around, figuring out what happened to him and why he cannot leave his town. Now, this is the final book. Of course, no synopsis for this, but this ended with a bang. This was a roller coaster ride. I loved this so much. I loved so much the discussion in this. There is a lot of action, yes, absolutely. Again, I cannot tell you what it reminds me of because it would be a spoiler, but it horrified me. There are some things in these, some aspects of these that just utterly terrified me. I was scared more reading this than reading some of the horror books I've read, definitely. And it's brutal, violent, adult only, but I also love the discussions behind. I love how we get philosophical in all of these, and how the villain is again very layered. It's like what I just mentioned in Perfume, I found that very one-dimensional, while here the villain is someone you can even understand to a certain degree, which is kind of like Thanos in the Avengers. At the end of the day, he had a point, you know what I mean? So it's kind of the same here, but then you hate his guts because of how well it's done. I will check more by Blake Crouch. I ended up giving this 5 stars, and this is not my genre. It usually is a genre that I hate, not hate, but it's a genre that I don't reach for, and when I do, I'm always disappointed. For me to give this 5 stars, it tells you something. This is definitely worth your time, this trilogy, the whole trilogy, but especially the first and final book, amazing. Then I have read the non-fiction pick for the month, which was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. This is her recollection of her time that she spent working in a crematorium. And I thought at the beginning this was more tailored on illustrating different death rituals around the world. Instead, it's a lot about her experience in the crematorium and her kind of working in the death industry. We do get some hints here and there of other tradition and how other people deal with the dead, or how people historically used to deal with them, but it's very tiny compared to all the rest. So definitely not what I was expecting. Love the writing style. She made me laugh considering the topic. That's remarkable. I think she has a YouTube channel. If I find it, I'll just link it down below. The reason why I was a bit put off by this book, it's nothing to do with her. She's an amazing human being. I loved her writing style, and I loved what she does here. She's trying basically to explain to people what death really looks like. And I think the goal was, if you know what it looks like, you can have honest conversations with your loved ones and even with yourself about death itself, and maybe you can become less scared of it. Now, I don't know, for me it actually didn't work in that sense. It actually made me more anxious about dying and about my loved one dying, and I found myself very disgusted by what happens to the bodies. And I am someone who actually didn't see in person like a real dead murdered body, but I've seen pictures of it. Again, with I study and all of that, and my job, we see the blood, we see the injuries and all of that, and yet these about corpses and how they're treated disturbs me. I don't know how to say that in any other way. I always went up to the point where there was an homicide, or someone was wounded or injured. I never got past that, what happens to the dead body later. The examinations are over, after all that is done, what actually happened to the body, how it's destroyed, preserved and all of that. And knowing that disturbed me. So it's really weird. I don't know why, I don't know what's going on here, I don't know why I took this so badly. I end up giving this 4 stars because again, it's not her fault at all. I was just not ready, or I don't have an explanation, I'm just rambling. So then I listened to Grown on audiobook. This is by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this is the story of Enchanted. Enchanted, she's an aspiring singer that gets in this relationship with this very famous rapper. He ended up abusing her, and at the beginning of the book something terrible has happened. So it's kind of back and forth with the present and the past, and how Enchanted got to where she is in the present that you see, and how she met Corey Taylor, and how they started this relationship and all of that, and all the abuse. The author states at the end, and I guessed pretty much soon, that this was based on the R. Kelly case. And if you don't know, R. Kelly is a very famous R&B singer who was accused of abusing, sexually assaulting minors, and he got away with it for a very long time. So this is very much based on that. If you have watched the documentary on Netflix, this is almost step by step what happens to these girls. This is not only well written, but it's also very well narrated. If you want to listen to the audiobook, it was amazing just as an experience. And I think it's full of powerful, very important messages. I ended up giving this 4 full stars. At the end, when we get more into the thriller aspect of these, I was generally a bit confused. A couple of things I thought we were just plainly weird, and I don't know, they didn't click with the message so much. And I cannot spoil anything, but I don't know, I thought there were some thriller elements in it that they just were not as well done as the rest was, which was denouncing the abuse of young girls and how powerful people can take easily advantage of someone who has a dream, and not only a dream of singing in this case, but also a dream of finding a companion, someone to love. So I don't know, there was some, so just toward the end that was a bit of an issue. And another issue I want to raise, because again, I work with sexual assault, raped victims, that's just my daily job, and there is some instances, a couple of maybe of sentences in where the author says, oh, if this was to happen to a white girl, you know, people would just listen to her. No, I'm not judging America's situation because I don't live in America, so I'm just living in England, and that's what I'm judging here. The issue with rape and sexual assault is way more complex than just race. White girls are not always listened to. Doesn't mean that white girls always get justice, they don't. And it's a social and economical issue way more than it's just race. And I can just go on a huge tangent on how actually sexual assault and rape works, again, at least in England, and procedures and police and issue we have. And the last thing I wanted to say, at least for England, just to keep in mind, is the amount of successful rape conviction, sexual assault conviction, it's around 3%. So it's very, very low. And unfortunately, I can assure you that 3% is not just white girls. Like, in the 97% who do not get their story heard, they do not get justice. There are women of every color, there are men of every color. So the message of this doesn't happen to white women, meaning white women will always be listened to and they will get justice. It's just simply not true. And I don't like this message passing along as someone who works with rape victims. I see victims of every color and race. I don't understand why throwing in some comments such as these that create division between white women and black women. I think we should just fill that gap and consider that women should never be abused, no matter, again, your circumstances or what kind of ethnic background you have. It doesn't matter. Abuse is no. I'm always put off by this kind of comments, as I definitely would if it was the other way around. If someone was to say this doesn't happen to black women, I would hate the comment as much as I'm against this comment. This doesn't happen to white women. So just to be completely clear, it's just about creating the gap or dividing women for their skin color. I just don't like it. We're all together in this. I said that everything I said about this book still stands. I gave it full 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend this book to everybody. Then I have read Written in Blood by Diane, probably butchering her first name. Anyway, this is a true crime. This is my true crime pick for the month, and this is the story of Michael Pearson, who stood accused of killing his wife while his version was she fell down the stairs. You can be maybe familiar with the staircase. I've talked about this a million times on my channel. I'll link down below some videos where I talk about this. I personally really dislike the staircase. The Netflix documentary, I think, is very biased. As someone who watched that, enjoyed that, and then learned so much more about that, I grew to hate it. So this is extremely well detailed. It starts basically from when Michael was a young man, and he follows him through his life, and you see another crime he has committed, allegedly, but he has done it, and you have basically the author recounting very extreme, well-written detail, very history up to the fatal night, I think in December, when Kathleen was killed. And you also follow in the last part of the trial. However, I didn't particularly like the trial part. This stops way before the complete story, so this stops after the first trial, but there is a whole second part of this story that's not included in this. She just published this before that happened. Again, the trial part, I don't think it was covered as well as it was the first part. Very interesting, a lot of information I didn't know. So I learned a lot in that sense. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Then I have read the military fantasy. This is by J.P. Harker. This is Sleeping Wolf, which is book number 2 in the Caledon saga, or Caledon, I don't know how you pronounce that, but the author so kindly can put it down below, because the author actually was the very gentle, kind soul to send me these. He sent me the whole trilogy. Now there are 4 books in the series, but at the time where I was sent these, there were 3 books. And he signed this for me, and I read the first book around 2 years ago, I'd say at this point. Really enjoyed it, gave it solid 4 stars. In the first book you follow Rian Win. Rian Win is the daughter of a chief of this tribe. She is a warrior, but now she's getting married. She is ready to settle down, start her own family, when the Roman Empire invades the land, and she has to go back to combat, fighting for her land and the people she loves. The second one, you follow, sometimes you have like perspective of Rian Win, but mostly you follow Gawain. Again, I might be butchering the names, I apologize for that. And you follow Gawain, who is a warrior from another tribe that you meet in the first book. This one had a very different thing than the first book. The first book was more military heavy, was more about plot twist and combat and all of that. And although here we do have plot twists, I'd say that this is more political, way more political. Something happens at the beginning of the book. We have to follow a kind of trial, and it gets very political between the tribes and the Romans. And we have got Gawain, who is this very mighty warrior, but all of a sudden has to also kind of fight in another way, not just with weapons. And I enjoyed this for different reasons than the first one. I ended up giving this 4 stars again. It's just a very different reason why I gave 4 stars. I really enjoy always the writing, and I always find these, even if it's a fantasy, it feels like historical fiction in certain aspects. I am very fascinated by the druids, so we have some hints of magic here and there, which I find extremely fascinating. And I loved the villains. I think we had a very good I wanna freaking strangle life out of you villain that worked very well. I also liked very much a character called Broad Kellas, and toward the end, what Broad Kellas do, it's something that really got to me. I really appreciated that beat. I thought it was a very honorable moment that I really appreciated, and I didn't see it coming. Something that I didn't love as much was actually the love aspect of this book, not because the love aspect was there, although I kind of struggled at the beginning to see Gawain as someone capable of those kind of feelings, just because I was used to see him in a very different aspect than that. So I struggled to reconcile his thought process with the Gawain I used to know from the previous book. But at the end I was, okay, now you got me invested in this, and then you leave it like that. That was the only thing that kind of I didn't appreciate it as much, if you want. But all the rest I really appreciate it. And if you're into fantasy, I think this is a different kind of fantasy that you don't see very often. It's brutal, so it's for adult only. Finally, if you are into military fantasy, and if you want a different kind of fantasy, because I have read many fantasy, but this definitely stood out as a genre. It's kind of a genre on its own. Yes, it's military fantasy, but it also feels very different than any other kind of military fantasy I've read before, and it's very well written. So if you want to get your hands on these, I'll link down below the page of the author on Amazon, where you can find the books and support the author. Then I've read Summer Fireworks and My Corpse by Otsuki. This is a collection of 3 short stories by Otsuki, and they are all horror stories. This is part of my Japanese horror pick for the month. I loved this. Especially the last story creeped me out so much. Just, it got to me, it scared me, it gave me all what is happening at all times. Fascinating, love the plot twist. I gave this 4.75 stars. I just really loved it. And the only reason why this is not a 5 stars is probably because of the story at the beginning, the first story. I loved the end, but I was not into the plot too much. So when the end came, I was like, oh wow, that's cool. But I didn't enjoy as much the first part of the story. So that's me just being very picky. But this is a very close 5 stars, and it's so original. I am gonna check out more by him, 100%. If you like horror, you wanna try something new, short stories, that's for you. And then I've read last day of lessons. I finished my lessons at 6 p.m. after being there for 7 hours, and I treated myself to Anne Rice's Interview with Empire. This is Claudia's story. I'm gonna do a whole video where I discuss my favorite vampires books, so I'm not gonna get into the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles series as much in this video. Wait for the other video if it's out by the time you're watching this. I'll link it down below. But this is an amazing graphic novel. I loved the art so much. It's one of my favorite things I've ever seen. I'm seriously stunned by the art. Claudia is someone that you meet in, I think, the first book or the second book in Anne Rice Vampire series, and you get hints, bits and bobs of her story, but in this, that's just her story. And I loved it. 5 stars. Love to see again all my beloved characters, and I loved how real this felt, how the story of this little girl kind of really got to me, and it's just, there is no complaints whatsoever about this. Like, from the stunning art, again, it's graphic, there is blood in this, so it's not for children. It's not a graphic novel for children, okay? Just so you know. I love the color palette. Like, you got all of these, and then when there is blood, it gets like all of a sudden red. Just, you know, you see red, and it's just amazing. It's amazing. If you love the series and if you like Anne Rice, you cannot miss it. I had to switch on the light. I'm sorry. I know it's horrible with the light, but we are done basically. The last book I've read in the month, and I've read this in 4 days, and it's 750 pages. 4 days, people. I was very proud of myself. I'd finished my lessons, so for like 4 days I just focus on reading and just have a good time with books. This is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, which we all know what it's about. And I think it's gonna get, I think the author is actually writing a pilot for TV for A Court of Thorns and Roses, so that's exciting. I'm definitely gonna watch that. And this is a 5 stars. Like, this is the story of Nesta and Cassian. Nesta and Cassian were my favorite people in all the series. I like Farah. I was okay with Reasoned, but I was never in love with them so much, especially with Reasoned. Like, I appreciate him as a character, but I never felt in love with him as many people did. Cassian, I'm a Cassian girl, and I love Nesta. Like, this couple is just so powerful for me. I really enjoyed every aspect of this book. Apart, if I have to judge something, there is a kind of Hunger Games element at one point in this, which it didn't click with me, but we get to the end of the plot side of the thing, and then we get Nesta doing something freaking amazing as always. This was just a mix of elements from movies that I absolutely loved growing up, or books that I loved growing up. Like, some scenes just reminded me of different movies and epic scenes in those movies or books that I've read before. And we have all of these happening to 2 of my favorite characters, like my favorite couple probably ever in any YA. This is adult though, it's not YA. Definitely full of sex. I sometimes found Sarah J. Maas sex scenes cringy. This one, I love them. Yes, so 5 stars. Honestly, that's how powerful this couple is, because of their plot-wise, although I loved it, I have to say that probably, if it was for me, I would have chosen the plot to go different ways or to do different things with these characters, and still I managed to like it anyway, even when there are elements that I didn't particularly love. Because it was Nesta and Cassian, I ended up loving. You can tell I'm definitely biased about this. I'm not giving you fair, objective judgment of this book. I'm just unable to. It's just a couple I love so much. So yeah, maybe don't take my word for granted. Thank you for watching. The light has abandoned me. I hate filming with this light on. So I'm going now, and I need to have dinner and just relax. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time. Ciao!